Welcome to my dad's car. Enjoy!
Welcome to My Dad's Car, a podcast discussing our personal relationship with automotive nostalgia. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be about your dad's car. It can be your mum's, your grand's, your parents', guardians, or even a neighbour's. If it made an impression, let's talk about it. Hello, you alright?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Why can't I hear you? I'll leave and come back. One sec. Hello?
Oh, look at that.
Oh, that's it. I can hear you now. It's a relief.
That would make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Hey!
Here we go. Looking rather still.
Let me sort myself out. There you go. How are you?
Yeah, we're good, thank you, Russell.
Hello, Russell.
How you doing?
Yeah, all right, thank you. Friday, I like to kind of throttle back into the weekend a little bit, but yeah, today's been manic. But anyway, hopefully this will be relaxing, will it, or not?
Yeah, of course. That's the idea. It's going to be fun.
We'll see.
So, a quick, for the benefit of the tape, we've met through Porsches, haven't we, I think, Russell?
Yeah. Through the myriad of kind of car and Porsche WhatsApp groups that I seem to be on. No, they're all great. I mean, keeping up with them is a bit of a challenge, frankly. But yeah, no, they're great in terms of getting a collective of right and like-minded people together that just kind of want to bore each other silly talking about cars, really, which is, what's wrong with that?
Indeed. So, well, let's jump into it. What's your earliest motoring memory?
All right, so we're going back a bit. I'm 56 years old, so I was born in 1967. So we're going to go back to the 70s here, I'm afraid.
Cool.
My earliest memory, maybe just because it was so kind of inspiring, which I'm sure we'll come on to, and it sounds very grandiose, but I'll just tell it how it is, was my dad coming home with a bright red Jaguar E-Type coupe.
Cool.
Now, I would have been about 4 or 5 years old, I reckon. So I was old enough to kind of know what cars are and obviously to, play with a few, I dare say. But I remember my dad coming home with this E-Type coupe, which, with the huge, great bonnet. I think it was a 6-cylinder, so whatever it was, can't remember, Series 1 or Series 2. So obviously it sounded fantastic. And it was at the time of one of my all-time favourite movies, actually, The Italian Job, coming out.
Yep.
So obviously we're back in the day here where it was either cinema or you waited 4 years for the thing to come out on telly.
Yeah.
No Netflix, no Prime Video. And so the Italian Job had kind of been out probably for a year or two and was, still is an iconic movie, including a couple of scenes with E-Type. So I think that was what inspired my dad to buy the car.
Yeah.
And I just remember as a kid it pulling up on the drive and literally just thinking, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
It's a kind of, particularly when you're 5 and you're only kind of whatever you are, 3 foot tall. Just a really amazing, gobsmacking, wonderfully looking and sounding in your face car that I think probably was the catalyst that set me off for my love of cars all these years later.
Do you remember how long he had it, Russell? Was it a good one for him?
Well, so most of us would buy a car like that and never sell it. My dad, throughout his entire life, he died 5-6 years ago, unfortunately, but throughout his whole life was a car nut. And he was part of the kind of family estate agency business. So they variously had a few quid, I suppose, not always, but, when the market was good, him and his brothers used to go out and buy cars. My dad, I can't remember him having a car, no matter how lovely it was, and we'll get into the list, I'm sure, for more than 6 months.
Blimey.
So the honest answer, no, I don't think he did. Back then it was pretty normal, I think, to have a car for 3, 4, 5 years. He would change cars like his pants, frankly. And maybe because I was a kid, and obviously he didn't owe me any debt of asking for permission or anything, he would literally just turn up at home with a different car, and it was frequent. Literally frequent, every few months, particularly if he bought something that I guess he didn't like very much. They were just chopped in regularly. He was probably a local Essex car dealer's dream, I would think. As soon as he rocked up onto the forecourt. Do you remember that E-Type we sold 3 months ago? Oh, look, he's back. What's he got his eye on now?
Here he comes again.
Yeah, so he definitely didn't have it for very long, like he didn't any of his cars, which is why his list of ownership is quite long.
Was he buying them new or kind of used vehicles, do you think, at the time? Or
No, I don't remember him buying much in the way of new cars. Funny, he was later in life, after property, Big long story around the estate agency business, but he got into car dealership.
Okay.
So he was known in Essex back in the 80s and 90s as Mazda Man.
Okay.
Because he had a Mazda dealership. So he had lots of new cars then.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the dealership. So he would be in and out of, whatever they were at the time, Mazda RX-7s. And I remember the Mazda 323 GT, which probably no one's ever heard of, but was actually an amazing car at the time. They did some kind of four-wheel drive rally thing.
That's right, a turboed one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EGI, I think it was called, or something.
Is that a little hatchback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was probably only 10 of them ever delivered in Britain, I would think. But Dad actually sponsored a guy to drive one in Group N rallying.
Okay.
And I, again, I'm a bit older than 5, but, rolling forward a few years, I remember my dad going to see this guy at the local quarry pit that guy's family owned. And the car was just sitting outside this porter cabin. And so the lad that was driving it asked me if I wanted to go out on it. I mean, you can imagine how many nanoseconds it took me to answer.
Yeah.
Whizzed around in this 323 EGI, whatever it was called, this kind of dedicated, all properly kitted out rally car around this quarry for 15, 20 minutes. It was, as it happens, I'd forgotten about that, but another car highlight at an early point of my life, actually.
Fantastic.
Did you get involved, Russell, with any of Dad's purchases as you got older, perhaps?
When I was older, I did. When he had dealerships, he had this itch that you wanted to scratch, which was to buy a Porsche 928. And up the road from us is Lancaster Colchester, which then and now is Porsche and also a Ferrari dealership. And again, being very spontaneous as my old man was, I think literally over a conversation that lasted no more than an hour or two one day, we were kind of in his car on the way up to Lancaster Colchester to look at this Guards Red 928 S4.
Nice.
And he committed to it, but then I ended up being the one that kind of got the thing delivered. And actually, I must have only been 20, 21, but luckily for traders' policies, I remember driving the thing. Talk about the wrong car in the wrong hands, 20 years old in a 928 S4, driving like you'd expect a 20-year-old in a 928 S4 to drive through the streets of Billericay and Essex one day. So yes, I did a little bit, but most of his purchases were kind of what I'd say his grander days of buying really cool cars were probably when I was, 5, 10, 12 years old. So, yeah, definitely not to be trusted with key to see if you can do a deal on that Aston V8 Vantage for me, son.
Were his purchases kind of with your mother's blessing, do you think? Or was he just sort of, he'd go and do it? And did she have a sensible car, or was that the family car?
Well, it was funny. She had a car that I remember having for years, which was a blue Capri 1600 GT. It was a Mark II Capri 1600 GT. GJN 653N. Can you believe I still remember the number plate?
Etched.
Yeah.
It is. And that was a pretty cool car. I think that's probably worth 10 grand now if you can find one.
Yeah.
Well, my mum and dad's relationship was not a great one, which is why they split up when I was about 7. And I think my mum was pretty compliant, shall we say. When my dad then left for his secretary and she became my stepmother, that's a whole different podcast, guys. That's a whole different podcast.
My dad's mistress.
Yeah. No, she was. Many therapists have tried to kind of sort my head out in that respect. But let's just say that she would have been far less tolerant unless she got something in lieu of one of his purchases, which normally would be, a handbag or a £500 pair of shoes or a Rolex or something. But anyway, as I say, it's another story.
Yeah.
So my old man was he's an entrepreneur, owned businesses. And as I say, he wasn't a millionaire, but we did okay. I remember as a kid, we lived in, a decent place and a decent road. And actually going back to the family, we actually had, and this again sounds very grand, I don't mean it to, but my grandfather built a house in the 1950s in a place called Norsey Road in Billericay, which is, it's a pretty nice road, with a load of land around it. And he gave the left-hand side of that land to my dad to build a house and the right-hand side to his other son, or one of his other 2 sons, to build a house the other side. So we ended up as kids growing up in a kind of pound shop Dallas Southfork type way, whereby we had 3 houses, but with one driveway connecting the 3 houses. So as kids, if we go back further than cars, by the way, as kids on bikes and trikes and, not skateboards back then, it's probably too early, but certainly go-karts, we had this wonderful time kind of weaving in and out of actually our parents and grandparents and uncles' expensive cars on this kind of 200-300 meter long driveway. So yeah, that was pretty cool when I think about it looking back. But and actually pretty much the whole family were really into cars. So my grandfather was into Rovers. You remember the old Rover TC 2000?
Okay.
My uncle Roger he's a pretty pompous individual, frankly. So he would always have a Rolls Royce or a Bentley of some sort. And they had, look, as we'll go on to, where my dad's concerned, who was the baby of the three brothers, I mean, an absolute plethora of really interesting 70s and 80s cars. If only he'd kept them.
Where did he go after the E-Type, Russell? What was the next move?
So what was next? I mean, do you want me to run through the list? I'm just trying to think of some of the orders. I'll tell you his first car. My dad's first car was a Mark I Cortina GT, which was brand new, apparently. So that was a brand new car. At a time when my grandfather, with his kind of 12 estate agency offices, was doing very well, probably very busy, so kind of gave his youngest son a car in lieu of love, frankly, I would imagine, back then. And within weeks, my dad rolled it.
Oh, no.
Rolled it into a ditch. And actually, the funny thing is, I looked this up years and years and years ago. The Ford Mark I Cortina GT sounds very grand, doesn't it? It had the sum total of 83 brake horsepower. So quite how he rolled it with 83 brake horsepower, I don't know, but he did.
Yeah.
So what did he have after the E-Type? I mean, honestly, Johnny had so many cars.
Yeah.
I mean, if the question is, what was the next most standout car?
Yeah, maybe we go for memorable then, if it's easier. Yeah.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a car that is now on my bucket list, if ever I could afford one.
Okay.
So it was a late 70s Aston V8 Vantage. What we would call, what I called as a kid, the bonnet car. Because a bit like the E-Type actually had, long bonnet, V8 engine, BBS wheels, an interior which was like something out of Savile Row. I mean, beautiful, beautiful soft leather, worn up, manual gearbox. I don't know how powerful those cars are. I can't remember, but they're a good kind of 300 brake horsepower, which certainly back in the day was huge.
Yeah.
And he actually had that. He might even have had that for a year, actually. And that was, in terms of looks and sound, I mean, again, as I remember as a kid, that I think probably equaled the E-Type in terms of kudos. But here's a funny thing. Just indulge me if you don't mind for a second. At the same time as having that car, he bought a number plate. And that number plate was Go 92.
Nice.
That was the plate. Go 92. And as was a habit of my old man's, as I recounted just now, one day he comes home without the car. He was in something else. I think he was in a 635 CSI BMW or a Merc SL or whatever else it was. The car's gone, right? So he's got to work in the morning in the Aston and come back in a completely different car. That wasn't unusual. But I remember, because these things, as you were saying earlier, are kind of embedded in your head, this wonderful Aston V8 Vantage that we all give our right arm for now, right? With this really cool number plate, which everybody around Billericay knew, that's Howard Quirk, Go 92. I said to him, as a 12 or 13-year-old, I think it was at the time, what happened to the number plate? And bearing in mind, this is before the days of retention certificates, I think, where you had to transfer the plate onto another car.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying this, and the reason I remember it is because I was horrified. He said, no, I let it go with the car.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I was very, very upset as a kind of preteen that this beautiful car had gone, but to add insult to injury, this really cool number plate that everyone recognised had gone with it. He didn't seem to care at all. Anyway, roll forward quite a number of years. So that was whenever that was. Let's say that was kind of early 80s. I found the number plate.
Wow.
I found the number plate at carreg.co.uk. 1 minute I'm browsing Piston Heads or Auto Trader. The next minute I'm on Reg Transfers or Car Reg. You're kind of thinking about, well, if I had a good year, what would I do? What would I buy? Or, would I buy X, Y, or whatever, number plate or car? Literally staring me in the face on the screen from carreg.co.uk is Go 92. I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe that my dad's old number plate has come up for sale. So I inquired and committed to buying it because I kind of had to, really. And then therein lies a very long story about how I nearly didn't get it on the basis that the guy that owned it, where it was supposed to be on a certificate, turns out it was on an old battered car with no MOT, no insurance, no tax, which obviously provides a problem in terms of getting the car in a decent state to get the plate off. Anyway, very long story short, many, many weeks later, I managed to secure the plate. So I bought it, and that now sits on one of my cars. And I am immensely proud to have my dad's number plate from the late 70s, early 80s on one of my cars. And shame on Howard. Shame on my old man for selling the thing in the first place.
Came back in the end.
Yeah, got it back. And now my kids have got eyes on it, of course. So, that plate is never, ever leaving the family. My brother, funny enough, my half-brother, who's a car dealer, strangely, I heard the other day, he's very myth. I found that plate because he remembers it as well. And, what he would have done to get his hands on it now. So, yes, it's sitting on a car in the garage as we speak.
Nice.
I don't know whether you know, and you don't have to say, did you pay more for the plate than he sold the Aston for?
Great question. I paid 13 grand for the plate. I don't know what he would have sold it for. I mean, I'd love to know what he might have sold. So it would have been about 1981 to 2 that he sold that.
So potentially
so. I mean, that car now is probably a 300 grand car. Back in the day, it was, I don't know, what was it, 5, 6, 7, 8 grand? I don't know. No idea. I mean, because it wasn't new, of course. So I don't know what a V8 Vantage was new.
No.
But this is in the days. I mean, we just gone through, crikey, oil crisis, time it was Falklands, 81, 82. So
is this the, if we're talking James Bond, is this the one with the skis?
Yeah.
Timothy Dalton. Yeah.
The Timothy Dalton car. Exactly that.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Funnily enough, there's one, I don't know if it's the same mark, but where I live, there's like a little archery club that takes place on a Saturday at one of the colleges. And I was walking through it once with the kids, and there was one of these Astons. I'm pretty sure it's the same type. We'll have to go past again, in like a sort of midnight blue colour, just sitting there. It clearly like being driven consistently, and it just had the driver's windows fully down. There's no one around. Just left it there. Just thought, it's unbelievable. Yeah,
sounds like the sort of thing my dad would have done.
I'd have to try and get a picture of it because it's a real stunning car, real nice car.
The owner hidden behind a tree, sort of Robin Hood style.
Maybe in the tree, yeah.
Just waiting to pounce.
Bait.
Yeah, you wouldn't dare nick it just in case you got an arrow in the eye. Yeah. No, I think there are certain cars in history, aren't there? I mean, and much less so now, I think. And I'm not saying that there's not beautiful cars made now. I mean, there are. We could probably name several. But going back to the 70s and 80s, there were certain cars that then and still now, 40 or 50 years later, I think are art forms. I think they're iconic. I think they're beautiful. So the Ferrari Dino, another one for my bucket list, which a car my dad never had, by the way. The E-Type, the V8 Vantage, the Lamborghini Miura, talking of the Italian job. That car, no wonder they're £2 million now, those Miuras, and they were about 9 grand new. I just think when you think that those cars were designed in a very basic time with no wind tunnel, literally someone probably just sitting there with a pencil and a kind of easel, what beautiful cars that era produced. And no wonder they're so coveted now.
Yeah. I guess, obviously, given your father's trade, the vehicles were very much kind of a status thing. He was looking for something that was sort of impressive, that would turn people's heads, I suppose, rather than going for something that was practical or, not at all fuel efficient.
Sounds like you're trying to say my dad was inadequate in some way, Andy.
Not at all.
Maybe. He was a big guy, actually. He was a very, very tall chap. He was about 6'4". No, look, and this was a time, 70s and 80s, where I think lots of people showed off. Particularly mid-late 80s. It was all about status, wasn't it? The whole Harry Enfield, loads of money, yuppie, red braces thing.
Yeah.
Seriously, I think there was probably a huge element of that. It actually still exists with most estate agents now, actually. In terms of proving their status through a watch, a house, or a car. There was a lot of that. And don't forget as well, I come from Essex. So you can imagine an estate agency family from Essex, you've got to tick the car box and keep ticking it for sure.
Yeah.
So, I think they absolutely were status symbols. And if I remember the circle of friends and work colleagues that my dad and his brothers had at that time, solicitors in particular.
A few filofaxes floating around, I bet.
Well, yeah, filofaxes and massive phones. In fact, like this, look.
Hey,
Oh, nice.
He says picking up a dummy Motorola 8500,
lovely.
which is a prop for something I'm doing on Sunday, funny enough. No, but I mean the cars, the cars around that time, Rolls-Royce Corniches, Lamborghini this. I remember our next door but one neighbour had 2 Lotus Esprits. He had a white Series 1, like the James Bond Roger Moore car that came out of the water, and a black JPS car. An incredible era. And I actually probably remember the cars more than I do the people and the neighbours, actually.
Yeah,
for probably all the right reasons. So, but yes, but cars are status symbols, aren't they? I think, I like to think when you go to a car meet these days, I think this is definitely true of the Porsche world, people are there to admire the car and talk about the car, whether it's a really cool battered old 911 SC like mine, or whether it's a guy that turns up in a 992 GT3 RS that he's paid 400 grand for. They're almost equally beautiful, iconic, and so on. I think there are definitely people that buy cars, whether in the Porsche world or not, but particularly outside of it, particularly Lamborghini owners, I'd say, that definitely do it for status. It's definitely about, look at me. I mean, and that's why, how many times have you seen a bright lizard green or python green Lamborghini Huracan? I mean, as if it's not ostentatious enough being in a 300 grand Lamborghini. Don't buy a bloody yellow one. Just to really underline the fact, hey, did you not see me coming? And did you not see how successful I am? So I think, Lambo owners, this is very controversial. Lambo owners are all about status and look at me, I've done really well. I'm a crypto billionaire. And I think I'd like to say this is true, that classic Porsche owners are much more civilized and they're about respect for the marque rather than look at me. Do you think that's true?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is a little bit more subdued, isn't it? A bit more subtle. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
It's having a car for the right reasons, is what I'm saying. Not to say to the neighbours, "Hey, look at me! I've just spent 400 grand." It's I'm lucky enough to have a couple of cars. One of my favourite cars is the cheapest car. It's a 35 grand 911 SC that needs loads of paintwork. I drove it this morning. I absolutely love it, and I definitely didn't buy that to show off. I bought it because I think a 79 911 SC is just a beautiful bit of kit. It's just a lovely sounding thing, So I think, look, buy a car for the right reasons. And who knows? The old ones might actually go up in value a little bit, which they seem to have done, don't they?
Indeed. So if we go back to the list, any memories of kind of vehicles taking you to school? I think you've got a Rolls Royce on the list.
Yeah, well, I remember my dad dropping me off in the Aston one day. So bearing in mind, when my mum and dad split up, I ended up being plonked into a state comprehensive in Basildon, having gone to a private school in Billericay. That was a bit of a contrast. And I remember my dad dropping me off at school in the Aston, which no one there had ever seen one of these things before, maybe apart from a film or two. And I mean, back in the day, rather than that being something where people pat you on the back and say, "Oh, your dad's got a nice car," I think I was bullied relentlessly for weeks afterwards because of the audacity of my dad turning up in a car that might have been worth more than people's houses back then. I definitely remember that. Rolls Royces, he had a little phase of Rolls Royces, and he definitely. I mean, after that one incident, by the way, whenever he did drop me off at school, if I missed the bus, I would insist that he drop me off about half a mile round the corner from the school because I just didn't want to stick.
No.
So he had a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow 1. He then had a beautiful dark blue, midnight blue Rolls-Royce Shadow 2, which I still think is a lovely, lovely looking car even now. Then he had a Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit, which was the kind of the new one. Well, it was new to him rather than it being brand new.
Yeah.
He went through this kind of this phase of Rolls-Royces, I guess as he got older, but he was probably in his late 30s, early 40s only. Decided to get into Rolls Royces, probably again, as you say, John, for status purposes. He went through a little Mercedes phase, had a 500 SL, had a dark blue SEC, is it 500 SEC coupe? The long two-door coupe thing with, again, whatever they were, BBS wheels.
Pillarless, aren't they, I think?
Yeah, pillarless, yeah. And again, a desirable thing. Then he had... I remember he had a Mark II Escort RS 2000. That was almost his daily. That was the car that he used for again, probably just a few months, but as his kind of daily thing. And that was a real fun thing. I mean, and again, I've got that on my bucket list now to eventually own a Mark 1 or a Mark 2 Escort RS2000s. I think they're, again, beautiful and iconic.
Yeah.
But loads of money now. You've seen how much they are? They're like 40 grand.
Yeah.
400 or 500 quid new.
That's quite a difference, isn't it? The Escort from those other ones. If you lined those up, I guess your typical cherished vehicle kind of going back 20 years or whatever. And then you've got the Escort, which is sort of the everyday hero, isn't it? But
that was an additional car. I remember he had that and the Aston at the same time, funny enough. And funnily enough, so I'm a Porsche guy. I love Porsche 911s, always have. The root of that, by the way, is Condor Man, the movie. Do you remember that?
I don't think I've seen it.
It's one of the worst movies that's ever been produced in America. Absolutely awful. And starring... You remember Frank Spencer, Young Mothers, do you have him?
Yeah, yeah.
Michael Crawford.
Yeah.
Michael Crawford, yeah. So he was the star of that movie. It's a 1981 film, and he was awful. The plot was awful. He was one of these, it was a bit of an Austin Powers type, I think, where he was pretty hapless, but ended up being a kind of super spy that somehow obviously did everything right in the end. A bit of a Johnny English type, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah.
In that film, as I'm watching it, going back to the early 80s, the baddies that chase Michael Crawford, Frank Spencer, through the mountains of whichever country it was, are all in black Porsche 930 turbos, like 6 of them.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Racing through the hills of wherever it was, Montenegro as it is now. So that sits with me as probably the catalytic Porsche moment in my life. But my dad never seemed to be particularly interested in Porsche. So he had the 928 S4 later on. He had a 924 Turbo in green, all colours, which, again, I think is a rare car now, probably worth a few quid. That was an awesome little thing, that was. And he had a 911 Sportmatic. So, back in the 70s, that horrible gearbox. So he had an accelerator brake, no clutch. Somehow it was magnetic or some magic nonsense where if you put your hand on the gear knob, that engaged the clutch. And I remember being in that car with him. It's a right-hand drive, yellow, must have been an early 70s Sportmatic F-Series 911. And he literally, even though he's a decent driver, he just couldn't get on with it. So that car lasted less than a week. That went.
Wow.
God knows where it went, how much money he got. So he's only ever, to my memory, had 3 Porsches. So I definitely didn't get my Porsche bug from the old man. But he's had pretty much everything else, certainly everything that you can imagine. He's had Jags. So he's had lots of BMWs, lots of Mercedes, Jags and Astons. I think there's not much back then that he didn't have.
Was there one that he regretted selling, do you think? Like maybe in his later life kind of looked back and thought, yeah, that was probably the one. There's
certainly plenty that I regret him selling. I don't know about him. I don't know, really. I mean, there's probably a few that he didn't regret selling, like the 911 Sportmatic, or the other one that was a real bag of spanners was a TVR.
Okay.
Now, TVRs have got a terrible reputation for reliability kind of now. Imagine what they were like in the early mid-70s.
Yeah.
Again, I remember him driving home in that and the sound of that, whatever it was at the time, V6, V8, whatever it was, the driveway, me as a little kid running out, my God, what's this? Jumping in the passenger side, him actually driving off and, giving me a kind of run down the road in it. I remember that not lasting long. So it might have been that the next day it broke down on his way to the office.
Yeah.
So he definitely didn't regret selling some of them. But what would he have regretted? I don't know, actually. I don't know. I mean, because he was a big guy, the Rolls Royce thing, I remember that really suiting him. The silver shadow and the silver spirit, where you kind of wallow along in those things, don't you, with their kind of, air-sprung wafty suspension and, quiet engine and so on. So yeah, maybe that might be the case. But I think from the point of view that he had this insatiable appetite for cars, it made a lot of sense for him to go into the motor trade, as did I, actually. Literally drive new cars, different cars, almost every day of the week. So I think that was very him when he got into Mazda and then later on Nissan dealerships. So in the latter part of his life.
I suppose it was the case of that thing of everything's always for sale, hence why there's such a quick turnover of car so often, probably in Russell's dad's case.
Yeah, but I mean, these days, I think if you were in and out of some really interesting classic cars, you might make a few quid.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, we're talking kind of 50 years ago. I mean, there was definitely no premium market. I would imagine that, Aston were very, very keen to sell a new V8, or even Jaguar, because obviously they sold quite a lot of E-types, didn't they, new, or produced quite a few. I would imagine he probably lost a fortune. I mean, I've got no idea, but, chopping in and out of those cars so frequently, I would imagine he lost a lot of money over a period of years, because they would all at the time depreciated, so, but it didn't seem to faze him.
No.
He's a real car nut, a real car fanatic. I remember so much so when he had the E-Type, that's all coming back to me now, guys. I remember we went on holiday to Spain as a family of four, me, my sister, my mum and my dad, before they split up. So this must be pre-1976. Me, my mum and my sister flew. My dad drove. My dad drove his E-Type to Spain and back again.
Awesome.
Because, great. I mean, I think he broke down on the way there and he crashed it, not badly, on the way back. I mean, back then, that's a lunatic thing to do. I mean, there's probably no AA, no RAC, no Jag dealerships in Spain, probably. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, talk about a risk, but that's because he wanted to drive the thing so badly. Maybe he'd only had it for a few weeks. Can't quite remember. So I think it's a very cool thing to do, but nuts.
Absolutely.
But that's what happens if you're a car addict, right?
I was going to say, obviously, we're speaking about his cars. Unless you're in a very fortunate position, if you're going to purchase a car such as those, you've probably got to get rid of one, haven't you, to get the next?
Yeah.
So it is a case of either you sort of commit to it, or you kind of keep doing the chop and change in order to sample all the ones that are out there.
Yeah. And I think, if you imagine back then, there was definitely no Auto Trader, because there was, no internet. There was Exchange and Mart, I think. Do you remember Exchange and Mart? But I don't remember my dad ever selling anything privately. He would have just part exchange with a friendly dealer that no doubt became probably one of his best mates, given how many cars. So, and back then, I mean, the only thing you could do was to try and sell privately, I suppose, which, given that you'd have to wait for the paper to come out 5 days later, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, what a pain. It would have been much harder to do than just to part exchange every time, which no doubt he did.
Yeah.
I remember a mate of his was a guy called Tony Lavoie, who I think still actually has a Vauxhall dealership here in Essex. So he was one of his mates. So no doubt Tony bought his sprawling £2 million mansion in Suffolk off the back of my dad's car habit. It's probably true. I mean, he did actually have a £2 million sprawling Suffolk house, Tony Lavoie, I remember.
Probably got a wing named after you, Russell. The Quirk wing or something.
The Howard Quirk Car Appreciation Wing.
Yeah.
Thanks. Keep them coming. Yeah. Oh, how funny. Funny. No, an absolute car nutcase, but I love him for it. And actually, if I could, I suppose I should thank him for the fact that, one of the most pleasurable things that I think I do in life is my interest in cars, being able to drive them, look at them, own them, whatever. And I've definitely got that from the old man, as you can tell. So I think there'd probably be a big hole in my life if it hadn't been for my dad's crazy influence from the point of view of him being such a car fanatic himself.
You mentioned your sister. Is it something that she's picked up as well, or is it not really kind of her bag?
Yeah, she likes a car. She works in the motor trade, funny enough.
Oh, okay.
And so she works for a technology business related to the motor trade. So
not TFL, is it?
No. It's a proper company that actually operates properly and correctly. I think she works for a website and digital media type business that has as its customers car dealers, motor dealers.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think I don't know. Never really spoken to her about it. I think I should do, really, shouldn't I? But she's had the same car for ages, from what I remember. So no, I don't quite know anybody apart from some of the people now that I know in the Porsche world that seem to have lots of cars and chop and change a lot. I don't know anybody else like my dad in terms of his history when it comes to car ownership, frankly.
Oh, yeah, it makes for some fantastic stories. So people such as your father, obviously that kind of history and that kind of passion for vehicles and just wanting to experience them all and change them. And with that, something I've kind of picked up from doing this, really, you forget that as a parent as well. I don't know if you've got kids, but you start to realise that actually at any point at any day could be the first memory of something for your children. Yeah. And you kind of don't realise that until you start talking about these and looking back retrospectively. And that makes you think a little bit differently. I think it makes me come through the door kind of in the evening or whatever with a bit more of a smile on my face.
Absolutely. I think it's a really interesting point. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. firstly, unfortunately, no matter how forceful I am with regard to my 4 kids, I've got a son who's in his late 20s, and I've got 3 teenage daughters. I've tried to get them all involved and interested in cars, and they're not interested. They'll look at one 911 versus another and say, they're all the same, Dad. Why do you need more than one, right? They're all the same. So my kids are not interested no matter how hard I tried to get them interested. But the fascinating thing for me is, and I'm sure this has happened to lots of people that listen to this, you could be driving along in, let's say, a reasonably nice car, whatever it might be. Let's say a 911 Turbo, new or old. And you get, a young kid who's 5 or 6 years old walking along holding his dad's hand in the street. And the dad looks and the kid looks, and you can see in the kid's eyes as you go past that you have just triggered something in that kid's brain that makes them a wannabe 911 Turbo owner 3 decades later, right?
Yeah.
I'm not only fascinated by the catalyst. I drove down the road from where I live here. It was probably autumn last year, a few months ago, and there was a guy walking along with his son on his shoulders, young son, obviously wasn't in his 20s or anything, young son. That would have been awkward.
Giant haystacks.
Yeah. And it was, whatever it was, August, September last year. And I had the window open and I heard the kid say to his dad, "Wow, Dad, look." And the kid's 5 years old. And you think, how do you know? How do you know that that's better than a Mondeo? Sorry, Mondeo. How do you know that that's not just a Vauxhall Ordinaria or whatever?
Yeah.
How do you know that car is, to some people, a lovely thing, a bit special? So, I'm with you 100%, Andy. I love, when you go to a car event and there's a load of kind of kids kind of milling around and they want to look in the car and they want to hear it rev, and you think, look, this is a wonderful moment, that this is almost being transferred to you now as another generation's love of particularly old cars. But what is it in our DNA as human beings that even at 4 years old, you know that a 911 is pretty cool, or a Ferrari 355, or a Lamborghini Huracan, or whatever. It's amazing, really, that kids know, and then that sticks with them. But the trigger, the catalyst, how incredibly interesting is that we're making and inspiring future owners of supercars and classic cars just by using cars that we will own. Which brings us another thing about making sure that, and this is a big thing in Nine Works, right? Drive them, don't hide them. Right? These people that make garage queens of their cars, I think that's such a sad thing. I think whatever you've got, even if it is a £2 million Miura or a 400 grand Dino, you've got to use it every now and again. I don't mean to go to the shops every day, but you've got to get these things out and drive them. Because they deserve to be driven and they're beautiful, but to inspire the next generation of car lovers.
I think going back to your point there, obviously talking about child walking along with dad, and I've got a 944, and at every opportunity I'll pop the headlights up to kind of kids walking past. But I think if you compared it to anything else, like, I don't think it's necessarily that they know what the cars are, but if they only ever ate apples and then someone gave them a banana, it would turn their head, wouldn't it? And in the same way that actually if you only ever see Ford Focuses and then someone drives past in a 911, it's a, whoa, what's that?
Yeah.
Do you think it might be something, I'm going to be controversial here, do you think it might be something a little bit more primeval than that, in that the way some of these cars get drawn is almost, and I don't want to use the word erotic, I don't mean that, but I mean almost of, you might know where I'm going here, but almost of the human female form. Do you know what I mean? Does that sound weird?
There's some curves and things, isn't there, for sure, with a lot of those supercars. And
I'm just saying that if subconsciously as a designer, you drew the 911 with big hips for a reason and big headlights, you know where I'm going? You might have to bleep this whole section. That later on, as a human with human DNA, albeit at 9 years old or whatever, maybe you recognise that. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Possibly.
Answers on a postcard, listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Are there any other cars you wanted to bring up, Russell?
We've gone through most of them, really. I've probably forgotten half a dozen or so because he had so many. I guess the only other thing that probably is worthy of note, which kind of sums him up, and something that I've never really done, is when he was a Mazda dealer principal, when he owned a Mazda dealership, they introduced the MX-5.
Okay.
Back in, when would that have been?
89, was it?
91 or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, early 90s, or what they called in the US the Miata. I mean, a really, really cool, nippy car at the time. That was one of the first cars I remember because I was in the motor trade at that time, where you couldn't get enough of them, and they were selling not just at list with no discount, but almost a little tiny premium. Anyway, they introduced Mazda UK a race series. So he entered, although he didn't drive it, he had a driver to race the car from. He entered the Mazda MX-5 race series. So that was a real fun time, going to Silverstone, Brands Hatch, and so on, with a load of other Mazda teams from different dealerships across the country, and seeing these things flying around race circuits and spinning off and all sorts. That was that was a real, again, another catalyst, I think. Talk about a really cool introduction to motorsport. I think they still might even run some kind of MX-5 challenge or series.
I think they do. Yeah,
I think they do. So yes, I remember that. That's another one of those things that sticks in your mind. By that time, I was probably late teens, early 20s. What I definitely remember is thinking, why hasn't he let me drive it? Rather than that bloke you're paying to drive it always comes third from last. But anyway,
has it led you towards any sort of motorsport or track day stuff because of that?
I've done a couple of track days. I'm lucky enough to have a 997 GT3, which is lovely and ridiculously quick, 400 and whatever it is brake horsepower. I'd booked a track day with Porsche before I bought the car. Took delivery of the car from Scuderia Prestige, I think they were, that I bought it from, down in the south somewhere. Anyway, decided to take that car to the track day at Goodwood, having owned the thing for 2 weeks, not knowing the car therefore, to a track that I'd never driven before. And the morning that I got there was pouring with rain.
Oh, goodness. This isn't going to end well.
Well, a very, very quick car in amateur hands, mine. A circuit, not only do I not know, but those familiar with Goodwood will know this. There's very little room for error in terms of runoff.
Yeah.
I did do the right thing. I actually booked an instructor for the first part of the track day session. So this guy sat next to me in the passenger seat. And then, the first thing he said to me is, you've got Cup 2 tyres, mate. And I said, have I? Okay, lovely, great. That's a good thing. And he went, not today.
Oh, no.
Not today, it's not. He said, Cup 2s are brilliant in the dry, really sticky. So it's pouring with rain. And as we pulled out the pits, I said, so look, tell me, I've never done this before. Traction control on or off? And he went, no, leave it on. God's sake. God's sake, leave it on. As we pulled out the pits, so it was because it was a Porsche club meet. They only allowed, I think, 8 cars out on track at a time. We were, I think, batch 3. The Porsche Cayman at the beginning of our group goes into bend 1, which is a kind of double apex bend, goes too fast, lifts off, spins, and hits the tyres and smashes the entire front of the car.
Oh, my goodness.
So literally 400 metres into his first lap of the day, didn't total his car, but smashed it bad. So there's me sitting there, hands very rigid on the steering wheel, thinking, okay, yeah, new car, new track, wrong tyres, in the wet, and I've just seen someone crash. I spent the next 3 or 4 hours of that track day driving like an 80-year-old woman.
I think I'd have done the old Homer Simpson's dad where he walks into the bar, hat off, hat on, straight back out again.
Yeah,
seeing that rain.
So not the most enjoyable track day that you could have. So that was a very long answer to your question. Have I done track days? I've done a couple. On that basis, I'm sure they're great fun if you really know what you're doing. But if you don't, the risk of totaling a fairly expensive car, which I think could be it certainly is very easy to do, rather puts me off the next one, really.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
I suppose that's part of the thrill, isn't it, for some people? That sort of, if I do come off.
Or smashing $100,000 car off.
Yeah. I'm done, yeah.
Well, yeah. And of course, on track days, I mean, particularly the ones that are a bit of a free-for-all, I think it's, as ever, it's not what you do, is it? It's what somebody else does. Someone spins directly in front of you and you T-bone them and you think, okay, now we've got the argument as to who's paying for that. Whose fault was that? And it's just, I'd rather do a track day in somebody else's car, I think.
You need a Mark 1 MX-5, don't you? $5,000. Absolute banger.
Perfect. Or go to the Bedford Autodrome thing that I did, which is Jonathan Palmer's place.
Yeah.
I did that a few months ago in lots of different things, karts, Ginettas. They let you go out in Formula F3000 single-seaters, which used to be, back in the day, the cars that used to support the Formula One.
Yeah.
When I got there, I couldn't believe that they were going to let us drive them, but they do. So you whiz around this kind of makeshift track on an airfield in these high-revving 3-litre V6 lunatic cars. So
Wow.
definitely rather do that. So if something goes wrong, safety and health notwithstanding, at least you're pranging somebody else's car and not your own.
Indeed. Yeah, I've heard good things about those days.
Yeah, proper fun.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Russell. It's been good fun and some great stories.
It's been therapy, chaps. Thanks.
We'll pop an invoice in the post.
That's what we say, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorted now. Yeah. I've come to terms with my dad's failings, and I'm no longer a car nut. Great, thank you. Cheers. It's been fun, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thanks a lot, Russell.
All right, speak soon.
See you later. Cool. Enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's good. And a nice Frank Spencer reference in there as well. Our first one, I think.
Yeah, some mothers do have them. That's quite the back catalogue, isn't it? And it's quite the frequency that his dad changed vehicles.
Yeah, I think we could have gone on for hours, couldn't we? Really, going through all those fantastic cars.
He'd sent me a list of about 10, but it sounds like there's probably at least double that with the the regularity of him chopping them in.
It's good to have triggered a couple of memories in there as well. For the old trip abroad where his dad drove the E-Type to, was it Spain? And then Russell and family got
a plane,
got a flight. Boring.
Yeah, that's cool though, isn't it? That's
I'm not sure I'd get away with that one if I sort of said to the kids, "Yeah, Mummy's going to take you guys."
I want to drive my Kangoo to Spain.
I'm going to take the Picasso to the T-Type. Yeah, brilliant.
So. Yeah, I've got obviously a soft spot for E-Types anyway, so nice to do that. And I'm a massive fan of the Italian Job.
Yeah.
So I can kind of completely relate to that as well.
I think the Italian Job is probably guilty for sort of engaging people in looking to get involved with so many cars in that film, because there are loads, aren't there?
Yeah, I think it's an all-time classic, isn't it? It's up there with the best of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed that. The number plate story, very interesting.
Yeah.
Obviously, the chances of that number plate being on screen on the day he went on there, but
unbelievable. Yeah, I actually thought he was going to say a much higher value as to what he paid for it.
Yeah.
So
we don't know how long ago it was, I guess, but
true.
There is the potential that
1980.
Yeah. The potential that, he paid more than his father sold the car for.
Definitely.
Just to get the number plate back.
Yeah.
But that's how it goes, isn't it? Kind of back in those, like we were saying to Sam from Southern Cars, like the Miuras and stuff that her dad was selling back then were nothing.
Yeah.
But how things change in kind of 10, 20, 30 years' time. So
yeah. Yeah, Russell made a good point, actually, which I didn't really consider, in that obviously chopping and changing cars so frequently back then, highly unlikely that he would have been making much, if anything, on any of them, because it's not like today where there's such a premium on those sort of cars.
Yeah. I think what else we've got now is the international marketplace, haven't we, for those sort of things, that if you've got a car that's special, you can put it on the internet and sell it within 20 minutes. And the chances of you finding the person who really wants that car in that colour, in that spec, with that mileage and that history is hugely increased, isn't it? And then you've got the opportunity to put it into auctions, be there online or kind of physical auctions. So you've then got to get two people who want that car, but that car could go for, hundreds of thousands over list price if numerous people want them, or if there's a shortage of them.
Exactly. Yeah, I suppose you've got things like someone in the Far East could quite easily say, "I'll take all three of your cars there, thank you."
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he must have been losing money hand over fist.
Yeah.
You got to think, even in the days of just buying a Ford from the garage, like you'd lose $1,000 just rolling it off the forecourt. So the hit you must be taking on an Aston or a Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
Kind of doesn't bear thinking about, is it?
No, it's a good one. It's a great back catalogue.
Yeah.
And yet another one that's clearly rubbed off on Russell, the son. Yeah,
clearly he's heavily influenced by that. Some nice stories from kind of him growing up as well. See, living in sort of a property that neighboured his grandparents and then his cousins as well.
Yeah.
Playing on sort of a longer drive, etc.
Be good to see a picture of that if there is.
Yeah.
Are any in existence.
No, really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you to Russell for joining us.
Absolutely.
Okay, John, I will leave you to it.
Cheers, Andy.
Let's wrap it up.
Roll the credits.
Thank you for listening to My Dad's Car. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please support us. buy us a coffee and subscribe. And tell all your friends.